Word, having me a my usual Starbucks blonde latte, 2 pumps of chai, my favorite. Hey, I thought I'd just share a quick thought. Just got done teaching a really good class with some bright-minded real estate brokers, and share with them just something to share with you uh, is what happens when everything goes wrong. Most of what we learn in life is how to walk right, how to speak right, how to live right, how to do right, how to be right. But we very seldom learn what to do when things go wrong. And I believe that nothing compounds a failure or a disappointment is when you don't know how to handle it. I experienced something that I really was not prepared to handle. One of the things that I've seen in the middle of world crisis as we've just come through and the past financial crisis that we live, many people melt down. And they don't melt down just because of the crisis itself, but they melt down because they've never been in that kind of situation. People who've never been divorced before, people who have never lost an important member of the family. Some people never lost a job. They've always been the golden child. They've always had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And finally, they got fired, right? Or they had to file bankruptcy, or they lost the big game, right? And they now have to figure out, how do you go home if you're Tom Brady and you lose a Super Bowl? That's not him, but I'm just saying, you lose something that you were expected to win. I've seen this a lot in sports. The team that was expected to win does not always win. They lost. You're making a great meal. I love to cook, as many of you know, and sometimes the recipe goes wrong. So the question is, what do you do when it all goes sideways? Well, there's a couple of things you got to remember. Number one, there'll be another day. That it's not the end of the world. It may feel like it at that moment. If you're a teenager and the girl breaks up with you, it may feel like the end of the world. When I had relationship problems, it felt like the end of the world. When I got dismissed from a position that I was doing my best in, it felt like the end of the world. The key with that is you can't stay there, right? You cannot stay there, because if you stay there, what I don't want, or nobody wants, is don't make permanent decisions in temporary places. You're just out of work for the moment. You are out of the relationship or a relationship for the moment. You're out of the money for a moment, not permanently. But many people make permanent decisions about their life, about who they are, how they see themselves in that second, in that period, in that time. And so it is important to try as best as you can to be philosophical if you can, reflective if you can, but also just emotionally sort of distance yourself from that. In other words, you don't want to feel like I should never fail, because that's not a proper thing for a human being to fail. We're all going to fail. We all have failed at different things, and you have to learn how to do that. Well, and you hear tried and true statements like, well, when you fall down, you got to pick yourself up again. If you fall off the horse, you got to get up and ride again. Well, that works unless you don't know how to ride the horse. That works unless depression now has taken over you, that you cannot get up. I have been in depression and I didn't really understand depression, but I realized I can't get up. I have fallen emotionally or financially or physically or mentally, and I cannot get up. I don't know how to get up. And so in those cases, you got to be willing to raise your hand. If you can't figure out how to get yourself out of the ditch, you got to raise your hand, right? If your car is in a ditch and you can't figure out how to get your car in the ditch, something, number one, went wrong. But in order to right the wrong or get the car out of the ditch, what's got to happen? You can't pull the car out of the ditch. I don't care how strong you are, how tough you are, how persistent you are, how, hear me roar, You're not pulling a 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 pound car out of the ditch. You're going to have some help. You got to raise your hand. You got to reach up to this little thing here called a device and call somebody. So the first thing is, number one, you got to get a period of reflection. Number two, you probably got to call somebody. There are many times that I call people. I have what I call people in my elevator. So when things go wrong for me, I'm calling one of those 5 or 6 people in my elevator to tell them about, hey, this is what I did. This is what happened. I just want to get your thoughts on this. Or here's what I'm thinking about doing in the emotion of the moment. And they're not emotionally attached to my problem. They're not emotionally attached to me being in the ditch. I'm the one attached to it because it's 3 o'clock in the morning, it's dark and rainy. I'm attached to being in it. But the person who's at home in their bed is not attached to it. They're going to see it differently. And they may say something like, you're always falling into ditches. I'm not surprised. Or I knew you were heading in a ditch. I'm not surprised. Or I'll be there in 5 minutes to help you get out of the ditch. But either way, I need another perspective. I can't do this on my own. The most dangerous thing to do when things go wrong, and this is what people like to do, it's what the animal kingdom does when it gets hurt or wounded, and that is it isolates itself from the rest of the herd. It will go and hide. It will shield itself from anyone knowing that it has any kind of thing going on. And for a human being, it's not a healthy thing to do. So if you've had a wrong done, or you have failed, or you made a mistake that you're embarrassed or ashamed about, the recipe is you gotta, number one, remember that's not at the end of the world. Number two, get some help. Find some counseling, right? We found that where I'm living in the Northwest, crisis calls went up 900% during the early stages of the pandemic because people didn't know what to do. They were at home, they were alone, they would stay at home order, and they know what to do. So they were calling and they were trying to get some answers, get some help. There's no shame in that game. You should be willing to raise your hand. The only thing that will keep you from raising your hand is pride. And you got to put your pride aside when you're in the ditch. I can't tell you how many times my car has stopped on the side of the road and, I got to call AAA to come get me. And I feel a little bit embarrassed because I feel like I should have known, or maybe I saw the light on and I kept ignoring it. And finally the car stopped. And now I'm here on the side of the road and people driving by at 60 miles an hour. And I'm kind of feeling dumb. But you know what? I'm going to go ahead and call AAA anyway. So don't let feeling guilty, shame, dumb, out of sorts stop you. Go ahead and raise your hand anyway. I love people when I'm teaching classes that even though they say, I think this is a dumb question, I'm going to ask it anyway. I applaud those people because I don't want them to stay what we have a term called suffering in silence. Don't suffer in silence. When things go wrong, don't blame yourself. You are a human being. Number two is don't suffer in silence. You're not the only one that ever burned the cake. You're not the only one that ever wrecked the car. You're not the only one that ever, lost the money. You're not the only one that's ever been through a divorce. You're not the only one that's ever been fired. So don't play the it's only me. I'm the only one. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. No, don't go in that song. So get some help. Because you're going to find when you start talking to people, they go, you know what, I had that problem. Or I know somebody that went through the same thing and this is what they did, right? Or go getting some counseling and counselor says, oh yeah, this is how we would sort of approach that. And now at least you got a path out of it. I see too many people isolate themselves, and to isolate yourself is unwise. You need to keep the strength. There's strength in numbers. So when I have a fall, I'm going to get the numbers. I'm going to reach out and get as many people as I know that I can have a positive conversation with. And I would say the last point is when you're in that situation is stay away from negative people and places and things because it won't help. It won't help. I know sometimes you think going to the bar might help because there's a lot of people there. But there's a lot of people in transition themselves. There's a lot of people with trauma and drama there, and it may not help you. You may actually end up feeling worse after you go and have a hangover, right? So choose your remedies wisely if you're going to do it, and stay away from negative people, right? When people start saying, well, I knew you were headed this way, or, I thought that, I knew that, and they didn't have the courage to tell you that you're heading to the ditch, I'm not sure if they're a friend. So you want to pick people that's going to be honest with you, right? Like the person I said, they might tell you, I knew you were going to ditch, or you always going to ditch, but never mind, I'll be there in 15 minutes. Okay. Look, I don't like the first part of that, but I appreciate that second part. So I appreciate the person's honesty and transparency. So the bottom line is not the end of the world when things go wrong. It's actually part of your journey in life. That is where the biggest lessons, I've learned more from my failures than I ever have from my successes, because my failures made me use all my brain cells and all my powers to try to figure out how not to allow that to happen again. So some of you are in the middle of a failure or just coming out of a failure and just getting your feet back underneath you. Keep walking. Okay. Keep moving. When you're going through hell, don't stop. When you're going through transition, don't camp out. Just keep moving, because you'll eventually get to the other side of it and you will be on solid ground. Eventually, you'll get the car out of the ditch, back on the road, and you're driving. Even if it requires some repair and some refreshing or refurbishing, eventually you'll be back on the road. You'll find another person. You'll find another opportunity. You'll find another business. You'll find another idea. That's the journey of life. This is Lewis Howard, and I love to inspire people. And I'll see you on another edition of Lewis Howard Live. Enjoy your